It's been interesting, man. I mean, like you mentioned, we haven't had a podcast since they made the move to hire Rob Childress as pitching coach, and it's been a really interesting month. I mean, we've talked about football recruiting and how that's been different. Baseball's been extremely active too, and this is more that time of year for that stuff. But it's been notable, even in the last few days, the impact that Rob Childress has had on the recruiting trail. I mean, he's a name, man. Like, even though he hasn't been the head coach at A&M for 3 years now, people know his name. Like, baseball community people, they all know who that guy is. They just recently got a commitment from a guy by the name of Tyner Horn, who's a pitcher from Kansas, who had been committed to Wichita State. He decommits because they have a coaching change. He hears from 80 schools, including Vanderbilt, Arkansas, some of the top powers in the sport, and commits to Nebraska because he wants to work with Rob Childress, and because he had a connection with Mike Sirianni, who was at Wichita State and is now at Nebraska too. But he did it in 3 days. He didn't even have to think about it. Like, he came to Nebraska that quickly. He's making an impact in the portal, in the high school realm. It's really been fascinating to see. So, it's and you've asked me this many times. Why didn't they make the move sooner? And we can have that discussion. But the fact of the matter is, like, there's just a lot of weight that he's carried on the recruiting trail. So it's unlike football. I think oftentimes if you have an impact baseball recruiting class, those guys make an immediate difference. I mean, you look at who's at the College World Series right now. It's freshmen that are on the mound that are dominating at the top teams. Some freshman hitters, but more freshman pitchers make a quick impact.
Yeah, once you get here, you can tell. I mean, the pitching this CWS has been determinative.
I mean, LSU, everyone talks about Paul Skeens, but they survived yesterday by throwing like 4 different freshman pitchers who got them through this thing. So, like, it happens. Like, if you're a really good program, you're going to rely on freshmen. When Nebraska was really good, they relied on freshmen, and those guys came through. So I'm keeping my eye on that as something. If you talk about like reasons for optimism next year, the talent that they're bringing in and just the nature of the game would say that if they can really flip things from a pitching perspective, it could get interesting. So I'm keeping my eye on that. It's been really fascinating to see.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if they had a great best pitching staff in the country is Wake or Tennessee, right?
Wake, yeah, and Tennessee.
Well, here's how good Tennessee is. They're in the SEC, and they were that good. Here's how good Wake is. They were in the ACC, and that good. If Nebraska had a staff like Wake or Tennessee, I'm not saying they will, but if they did, I'm not sure they would lose in the Big Ten. Like, it would be an insane. It'd be like what Oral Roberts did, in
the Summit, yeah.
I mean, imagine Tennessee's ERA if they had to just like land in the Big Ten for a year. I mean, it'd be comical. So Nebraska's, it feels like pitching is what you got to do. You've just got to, and obviously they made the change because they weren't bad, like you said. They weren't bad, but you also have to take into account that whatever their ERA ranking was, 39th.
Top 50 for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but they were doing it in the Big Ten, so the Big Ten isn't very good.
Yeah, context matters, no doubt.
And so, like, if you took that staff and you put it in the SEC for a year, it wouldn't be top 50. Probably.
That's true.
And so, to be really elite, you probably have to be in the top 15 or the top 10 if you're playing a whole Big Ten schedule. And so I think, maybe they can get there. I don't know. Like you mentioned Tyner Horn, the first name I thought of when Rob Childress was hired is, well, can he go do something with Drew Christo? Because Drew Christo is that guy, right? He had 80 calls or whatever. He could have gone anywhere in the country.
Could have gone to Stanford, yep.
And he just hasn't taken off yet. And I don't really understand pitching well enough to know how that's not possible. But obviously he hasn't. Because they didn't throw him very much.
That's right. And guys develop at different rates, and you see all the time guys have great college seasons, and then the next year they fall off. I mean, it does happen.
Tennessee had a guy like that. I was looking through the notes. That had a guy that was great 2 years ago, and then he was a little less, not quite as good the year ago, and then he got a little worse again. But, like, you would hope that when you get a top recruit like this Tyner Horn guy, that you're able to, that he pans out.
Yeah.
And I'm at this point, because, I mean, it seems like they get a recruit every other day.
Yeah.
Every month. It's like, how many guys do you guys have? I'm a little skeptical and cynical. I'm like, okay, you did this wherever you were at, but Nebraska's had a lot of these guys in recent years, and they haven't been very good. They just don't pan out. The kid from A&M a couple years ago, boy, he was supposed to come in and he was supposed to be something.
Ornelas, yeah.
And he just wasn't. So I just wondered, I think that's the area where Childress has got to get him going, is not just in signing the good player or landing the good player, but getting them to produce.
Mm-hmm. A few examples of that, but not a lot in the last 4 years. Emmett Olson was an example of that. He regressed this year. He would tell you that. He had an outstanding 2022 and took a step back, even though he had some great games. But yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the name of the game. You got to have arms. You got to have a lot of arms, and they got to be good. So we'll see if Nebraska can do it.
Well, I think it was probably a good investment.